welcoming you all to IMPA and to Brazil for the French. It's a great pleasure to host you all in this event in geometric analysis. Let me just say again that one of the goals is to strengthen the interactions between the Brazilian and the French community. So this is a perfect opportunity to interact, and I'm sure that we'll be very successful in that. So thanks for coming. Just two warnings. First of all, the abstracts are going to be in the internet. So if you can't find them in the posters, you can go to the website and they will be all there. And there is a slight change in the program. The last talk, let's see, what time is it? 3:30 or 3:30 will be given by Gerard Besson instead of Jorge Lira. Okay, so let's start our activities. The first mini course is by Zindine Djadli, professor at the Institut Fourier in Grenoble, and it will be on conformal deformations of metrics and rigidity of closed manifolds. So please.
Thank you very much. Before starting, let me thank Fernando, Pierre, and Gerard for giving me the opportunity to give these lectures here in Rio. This is my first time in Brazil, and I really enjoy it, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to participate to this exchange between IMPA and Institut Fourier in Grenoble. Okay, so my lectures will be on conformal geometry. So I will try to be very basic, so don't hesitate if something is not clear or if I'm going too fast. Don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask me questions, okay? So I will start with some basic materials today and maybe give an introduction to the Yamabe problem and give also some details on the proof on the Yamabe problem. And tomorrow I will start talking about 4-dimension. Okay, so before starting, I should mention, and it's not because you're here, that if you really want to learn some very nice things about the Yamabe problem in particular, there is a very nice survey, recent one by Fernando and Simon Brendler. The survey is on arXiv, right? So if you are really interested in this problem, not only the solution of the Yamabe problem, but also problem of, for example, compactness of solutions and so on, you should absolutely read this survey. Okay, so let me start. In all my lectures, all the manifold will be without boundary, smooth. And the dimension, which denoted by n, will be greater or equal to 2, basically. I will say what is the dimension of the manifold on every occasion. So in conformal, I think that since there is a movie, I should write as much as I can on the blackboard so that people maybe later in 50 years, they will be able to follow what I'm saying. So in conformal geometry, the very important set is what we call the conformal class of G, which I denote by bracket of G, which is by definition the set of all metric that you can write in this way, e to the 2w times G, where w is a C infinity function on M. This is the very, very important set, which is called the conformal class of G. So what is the basic question? Basically, the question is, let's say, is it possible to obtain informations on M? And when I say that, not only geometric information, maybe also topological information on the manifold, by looking to this conformal class, by, let's say, by the properties of maybe some special metrics in this conformal class. Okay, so what is the main tool? And I will see it today. The main tool is, if one wants to give some answers to this question, is the use of what we call conformal invariance. This is the important idea in this lecture. Once you have some quantity which is conformally invariant, I will explain what it means. It is very useful, and you will see how later. Okay. Let me start with some very basic examples, and also the lowest dimension, the case of surfaces. So I take a surface, and okay, as you know, there is a very natural geometric operator, which is the Laplace-Beltrami operator. Okay, maybe I should say why this is a natural geometric operator. For example, I will give other reasons later, but basically, for example, if you look to the spectrum of this operator on the surface, you can read a lot of geometric information also on your manifold. Okay, so also in, let's say, in conformal geometric, this operator has very nice properties, as I will show you in a few seconds. For example, if you take a conformal metric to the original metric G, then you have a very nice relation between the Laplacian for this new metric, GW, in terms of the Laplace operator for the original metric, and the formula is this one. This is a very nice formula. Let's say that this operator is conformally covariant. This is the meaning of this formula. It's conformally covariant on surfaces. Be careful, this is not true in higher dimension. I will explain that later. Another very important fact is the following. Take a conformal metric to the metric G. So I write it in this way. And you take the Laplace operator for the original metric G, and you apply it on the conformal factor W, right? And there is a very nice formula, which is the following. I'll write it down. Here, what I denote by Kg, it's the Gauss curvature. Okay, the classical Gauss curvature. This is just a matter of computation. Just write down everything, and okay, the Christoffel symbols of this, and you just compute everything, and you find this this relation. It's very easy. A little bit straightforward, but there is no difficulty to obtain this this formula here. So this formula here has a consequence. If we integrate this, with just this formula, with respect to to the metric G. So what you obtain, of course, the integral of the Laplacian is 0 on the surface. You don't have a boundary. So you integrate the Gauss curvature on the manifold, and what you find is this. Okay? And of course, this here is exactly the element volume for the metric GW. So the consequence of this is that this quantity here does not depend on G. It only depends on the conformal class of G because of this this relation here. This is what we call a quantity which is conformally invariant. It depends only on the conformal class, not on the metric you take in the conformal class. Okay, so I'm not, I don't forget that on surfaces, of course, this is more than a conformal invariant, as you know, because of the Gauss-Bonnet formula. The Gauss-Bonnet formula tells you that actually the integral of the Gauss curvature is a topological invariant. This is stronger, of course, than this. Okay, so maybe just to understand why conformal invariant quantities are important, I will state a very classical result, which is now called the uniformization theorem. There are many proofs, there are at least 4 proofs of this theorem. The first one, I think this is due to Koebe, maybe Poincaré. But there is also André Weil. Recently, in the late 80s, Osgood, Phillips, and Sarnak gave another proof. This proof is based on the complex analysis. This one is completely different. I will show you what it chooses, and it's very interesting. I will speak a little bit about this proof later. And there is a more recent one using the Ricci flow, the Yamabe flow, actually, since we are on surfaces, which is due to Shao, Tian, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the last one. Okay. It's very recent. I think it was 2 years ago, maybe. Okay, what does this theorem tells you? Okay, if the integral of the Gauss curvature is positive, then you can find the metric in the conformal class of G, such that the Gauss curvature for this metric GW is constant, of course strictly positive, because this quantity is conformal invariant, so you know the sign of this constant here. And it follows that your manifold, your surface, is a quotient of S2. If this integral is equal to 0, then there exists a metric such that the Gauss curvature is equal to 0. And it follows that your manifold is a quotient of R2. And if the integral of the Gauss curvature is negative, then there is a metric in the conformal class of G such that the Gauss curvature of this metric is a constant, negative of course, and it follows that your manifold is a quotient of H2. This is a classification theorem based on the study of the sign of this conformally invariant quantity. Okay, so this is the case of surfaces. And this is, in some sense, an ideal situation. Just looking to the sign of this quantity, you can classify your surfaces. And this is what we want to do in higher dimensions. And you will see that in higher dimensions, things are not that easy. Okay, so so the case of higher dimensional manifolds. So I take a manifold, and now I assume that the dimension is greater or equal to 3. Okay, so as I said before, when the dimension is not equal to 2, this is not true. This is not anymore true. The Laplacian is not conformally covariant. If you want to have an operator which has basically the same symbol as the Laplacian, you should add some extra term to have something that behaves exactly like that. This is what we call the conformal Laplacian. And the conformal Laplacian, the definition of the conformal Laplacian is, so it's Laplacian of phi plus a linear term which involves the scalar curvature. Okay, this one is conformally covariant. Why? And it's also here, it's also a matter of computation. There is nothing difficult in this formula. Take a metric G tilde in the conformal class of G. For some, let's say for some technical reason to have very nice formulas, in higher dimension, when we take a conformal metric, we don't write it in this way, with an exponential, not in this way. We prefer to write it in a different way, which is equivalent, of course, which is this one. U to some power for the n minus 2 times the metric, where U, of course, is a smooth function, and also positive, in order to have a Riemannian metric, of course. So if you take this metric G tilde in the conformal class of G, you have a very nice formula. The conformal Laplacian for the metric G tilde applied to some function phi is equal to U to the power, there is a minus or plus? I never remember, there is a plus. N plus 2 over n minus 2 time the conformal Laplacian for the metric G applied to U times phi. Okay. For example, if you take phi equal to 1, you have a very nice formula that I will write down here. Take phi equal to 1. Then what you have is that the Laplacian of u plus n minus 2 over 4n minus 1 times the scalar curvature for the metric G times u is equal to, so here what you will get is, this is for G tilde, so n minus 2 over 4n minus 1 are G tilde to some power, so there is a minus here, sorry. So what you get here is n minus 2 over 4n minus 1 r d tilde u to the power n plus 2 over n minus 2. Okay, so this is what this formula here, this equation, is usually called the scalar curvature equation. Because it gives you a relation between the scalar curvature for the new metric, for the metric G tilde, in terms of the scalar curvature for the original metric, Rg. Okay, so now maybe I will start speaking about the Yamabe problem. So the Yamabe problem is, from the historical point of view, it was a very important problem, and it took a lot of years to solve completely this problem. And okay, the first works on this problem was in the 60s, in 1960, by Yamabe. And there are some works, important works, 8 years later by Trüninger. Then, 8 years later, by Aubin, Thierry Aubin. And let's say the conclusion of the story was given by Ritschen in 1984. So this is these are all the steps in the solution of the Yamabe problem. And it was the starting point for this, maybe we should say that it was the starting point of what now people call the geometric analysis. And a lot of tools in geometric analysis were introduced in order to solve this problem. And this is the reason why it is a very important problem. Okay, so now I will describe the proof. Today and tomorrow I will describe the complete proof of this problem. So what is this problem? So you take your manifold. I assume that the dimension is greater or equal to 3. Okay? The question is the following. Is there a metric, G tilde, in the conformal class of G, such that the scalar curvature of this new metric, G tilde, is a constant? So this is the question. So of course, you cannot, if the answer to this question is yes, you cannot expect such a theorem, because the scalar curvature in higher dimension is too weak to have this kind of classification, just looking on the sign of this constant here. So there is no hope just answering this question to have this kind of classification. in some situations, I will show you maybe in my last lecture, in some situation, this information here, if you couple it with other information, you can say something of like that. Okay? So let me now start the proof of this Yamabe problem. So because of this scalar curvature equation, you can write down the PDE, which expresses exactly this problem. You are looking for a metric, G tilde, that you will write in this way. And you are asking for the scalar curvature for this new metric to be a constant. So what is the equation you obtain here? You want a constant here. So the equation to solve is the following. Where lambda is a real constant. So you're looking for a solution U, of course, C infinity, because you want a Riemannian metric here, a smooth Riemannian metric here, and also positive. So this is what you want to do. If you do this, you just take, see, if you have a smooth and positive solution to this equation, you just take the metric G tilde, which is this one, with U, a solution of this smooth and positive solution of this equation, and you will have, because of this equation, the fact that the scalar curvature for G tilde is constant. Okay, so we're going to solve this equation. So what we are going to use is what people usually call in the PDE variational methods. So basically what we do is that we integrate this equation, and we just want to find the critical point for, let's say, the function which is associated to this equation, and we integrate it. So the functional associated to this equation is the following. Maybe I should give a name to this equation. I will call it Yamabe equation. So the function which is associated to this equation is the following. I denote it by JW, which is, okay, the integral of the gradient square of W plus a minus 2 over 4a minus 1 RGW square over, so this is for this, when you derive this part, of course you get this. And now you want to have this. So you normalize, basically, to n over n minus 2. I put some absolute value here. N minus 2 over n. Okay. So it's very easy to see that if U is a critical point of J, of course U C infinity and positive, then U is a solution of the Yamabe equation. Just have to derive this, and it's very easy, just a very easy computation. So what we are going to do is we will try to find the critical point for this functional here. So what kind of critical point? The simplest situation is where you are able to find a minimum or a maximum of this functional. Okay. So let me just make a remark. Because of the scalar curvature equation, it's very easy to see that this functional J is nothing else that the integral of the scalar curvature of GW, integrated, of course, with respect to GW, over the volume of the manifold, of course, for the metric GW, to the power, of course, n minus 2 over n. Where GW, of course, is W to the 4 n minus 2 G. It's because just use this. Here you have exactly the scalar curvature of GW. This here is called the Einstein-Hilbert functional. Basically, this functional J, we'll use it to solve our problem, is nothing else that the Einstein-Hilbert functional. Okay, we renormalize it using the volume in order to have something which is scale invariant, but it's nothing else that the Einstein-Hilbert functional restricted to the conformal class of G. Okay, so now I should, I think, okay, I should start with the proof. So maybe you are wondering why it took 24 years to solve this equation. The reason why this equation is so difficult to solve is it's not a matter of geometry. It's because of analysis in some sense. The main problem you encounter when you try to solve this equation, when you try to find a critical point for this functional, is the fact that okay, the set of function on which you will work, because you want a set of function which behaves in a good way, so a complete one, and C infinity of the manifold is not a good set of function. You want something which is with function with, let's say, weak regularity and also a complete set. So the set you will use to work is the 1-2 Sobolev space, which is the set of function. I will write it in the easiest way to define it. It is the completion of C infinity of M with respect to the following norm. Adjunct of Q plus the norm in L2. Okay, so this is the Sobolev state. If you prefer, it is the set of function with the gradient in the sense of distribution of your function in L2, and also the function should be in L2. This is another definition of H1, 2. So it's it is now classical in functional analysis that you have what is called the Sobolev inclusion. So you can inject H1, 2 of your manifold in Lebesgue spaces for Q less or equal to 2n over n minus 2. Okay, say Q is bigger than 2. It doesn't matter what you put on the left side. And this injection here, it is compact if Q is strictly less than 2n over n minus 2. So it is, sorry, I've forgotten to write here. It is continuous if Q is between 2 and 2n over n minus 2. It is compact if Q is strictly less than 2n over n minus 2. It is not compact if Q is equal to 2n over n minus 2. And the difficulty here is that what you have here is exactly this critical value, 2n over n minus 2. And this is the reason why this problem is so difficult to solve. It's because of this power here, this one, which is 2n over n minus 2 minus 1. And this is the reason why there is a problem if you want to solve this equation and try to find a critical point for this functional J. Okay. The questions? Is it okay? What is Q? It's here. You can put this set into this set for all powers here between 2 of 2n over n minus 2. Other questions? No?
Just forgot to say the Laplacian is minus.
Yeah, yes, sorry. I'm sorry, yes, I always forgot to. My Laplacian here is the one with non-negative eigenvalues. if you prefer on Rn, it is minus the sum of the second derivatives. Thank you. It was an important information. Okay, so now what we want to do is to overcome this problem of compactness, this lack of compactness in the embedding of H12 into L2n over n minus 2. So the idea is to try to lower this exponent here. This is what we are going to do. So to overcome this problem, this difficulty, this lack of compactness. So we consider a family of equations of this type, but with a smaller exponent here. U to the, Q. And of course, we are still looking for smooth solution and also, of course, positive solutions. And Q will be, okay, between 2 and, of course, strictly less than n plus 2. Sorry, I write minus 1 here and 2n over n minus 2 here. Okay? So, now, when Q is strictly less than 2n over n minus 2, this is the compact injection here. So everything goes fine. And it's very easy to prove. This is a theorem. This is basically due to Yamabe and also to Yamabe and Tridinger. If you I should say something before. Should write down the functional which is associated to this equation. I call it J of Q, which is gradient of W squared plus n minus 2 over 4 n minus 1 scalar curvature of G W squared. So this part didn't change. And this over W per Q to the 2 over Q. So, okay, what you want to do is to find a minimum of this functional, and this is exactly this is not very difficult. What you can show is that if you take okay, so the first thing that you prove is that this functional here on the set H12. This is bounded from below, okay? And what you can also prove is that if you take a sequence that converges such that sequence Wi with JQ of Wi going to the infimum of this functional on H12, this sequence, wi is bounded in H12. So this will tell you that you can make this part converging, and this will also converge because the embedding here for Q strictly less than 2n over n minus 2 is compact. So up to a subsequence, everything goes fine, and you have the following theorem. For all Q between 2 and 2n over n minus 2, there exists a function uq, smooth, positive, such that the Laplacian of uq plus n minus 2 over 4n minus 1 scalar curvature uq is equal to lambda q uq to the power q minus 1. So solution of this equation here with some coefficient here, lambda q, which is exactly the infimum of gq of w for w in h12 of n. And I ask also that the LQ norm of w is equal to 1. Since the function is scale invariant, you can always ask for this to be equal to 1. It is scale invariant. Okay. So when Q is strictly less than 2n over n minus 2, solving the subcritical equation, I will call it SCYE, subcritical Yamabe equation, is very easy. So, I have 3 more minutes, right?
We have until
I started at,
11.
no, I have more than this. It's not, yes, yeah, I have 11:40. 50. Yes. 30 plus 20 is equal to 50. That's important information. Oh, I have more than half an hour. That's perfect. Okay. So, any questions? We have time for questions. So feel free to ask. It's okay? Gérard, a question? This is analysis. This is maybe a little bit difficult for you. No, it's okay? So, now what I want to do is to consider this sequence. I will subcritical Yamabe equation with power q. So I have a family of equations, now using this theorem, a family of solutions. So I have a sequence of solutions of subcritical Yamabe equation. And what I want to do is to study the behavior of this sequence uq when q tends to the critical exponent to n over n minus 2. So now what I'm going to do is studying the behavior of this sequence uq when q goes to 2n over n minus 2. So the hope is very simple to understand. What you want to say is that, sorry, it's written over there. is that when q goes to 2n over n minus 2, uq goes to some function u, which is smooth, of course, positive, and is a solution of the equation you obtain when q goes to 2n over n minus 2, which is exactly this one. So this is maybe a crazy hope, but this is basically what you expect. You let q go to 2n over n minus 2, and you hope that this equation will converge to this equation with a nice function u, which will be the limit of the sequence uq. This is what we are going to do. And it's not that easy. Okay, so now it's time for let's say now I'm going to introduce the fundamental tool to do this. As I said in my introduction, usually in conformal geometry, the most important tool is the conformally invariant quantity. And this is the case here. I will introduce a conformal invariant quantity, which is the key for doing this, passing to the limit for this equation. And this fundamental tool is called the Yamabe invariant. So the Yamabe invariant is a conformal invariant. It only depends. So you take your manifold MG, and it only depends on, of course, your manifold and the conformal class of G. It does not depend on the metric you choose in the conformal class. Okay? So the definition of this invariant is the following. You take the infimum of over all metric in the conformal class of G of the integral of the scalar curvature of G tilde that you integrate with respect to G tilde over this. This looks basically like this one. This is exactly it. It's the infimum of this stuff here. You normalize it. Of course, if you don't, you will have something which is not very interesting. So you have to normalize this, just as we did before. That you can write also, because of this remark here. You can also write that it is the infimum over all function in H12 of M, of course non-zero, of the integral of the gradient of W squared plus n minus 2 over 4n minus 1 scalar curvature W squared that you integrate with respect to metric G over the integral of W to the 2n over n minus 2 to integrate with respect to G, of course, to the power n minus 2 over n. Because of this remark here, this is equal to this. Of course, because of its definition, of course, it only depends on the conformal class of G. You take the infimum over all metrics in the conformal class of G. So this invariant is the key for the solution of the Yamabe problem. This is the most important tool to solve the Yamabe problem. Okay, so I'm going to start the study of the behavior of this sequence UQ. So you have your equation here. You want to pass to the limit. So maybe for the moment, for me, it's too difficult to try to pass to the limit on UQ. I will see that later. First, I will concentrate on this lambda Q here. Okay? This is a lemma. That tells you that the limit, when Q goes to 2n over minus 2 of lambda Q, yes, I called it lambda Q, is equal exactly to the Yamabe invariant of your manifold. So the proof is not very difficult. So I take first a positive epsilon and u in h12 of m, non-zero of course, such that g of u is less or equal to the Yamabe invariant plus epsilon. So the Yamabe invariant is the infimum of the functional j. So you take an epsilon and you have a function such that you have this. Very easy to see that the limit when Q goes to 2n over n minus 2 of this here so the integral of u to the q 2 over q, that's very easy, is equal to u to the 2n over n minus 2 to the n minus 2 over n. Okay? So now, because the only difference between the functional jq and the functional j is here, the denominator of the functionals. And since you have this, you have that the limit when q goes to 2n over n minus 2 of jq of u is equal to j of u, which is, of course, this is here. This is smaller than the Yamabe invariant of g plus epsilon. Okay. So remember that lambda q is the infimum of jq. So because of this, this implies that the lim sup when q goes to 2n over n minus 2 of the lambda q is smaller than this plus epsilon. Since epsilon is arbitrary, this is smaller than this. Okay? So it's not difficult. So you want now the other inequality. And you do it using Hölder inequality. So you have that you have the lambda q, that the integral of the uq, solution of this, given by this theorem, the integral of uq in LQ is equal to 1. Okay? UQQ is equal to 1. So you use the Hölder inequality. I hope I made no mistake. So this is smaller than UQ to the 2n n minus 2. Q minus 2 n. The volume of your manifold to the power, G, bracket G, 1 minus Q n minus 2 over 2n. Okay. This is a 2n here, sorry. So I let Q going to 2n over n minus 2. So the limit when Q goes to 2n over n minus 2 of UQ to n minus 2, this goes to 1. This is bigger than 1. This is bigger than 1. Okay? And now, if you write G of UQ time, I should let some room here. So if you write G of UQ time the integral of UQ to the 2n n minus 2, the n minus 2 over n. So this is equal. Remember that the only difference between J and JQ is the denominator. So this is equal to the integral of the gradient of UQ squared plus n minus 2 over 4n minus 1 scalar curvature UQ squared. Okay? And remember that the LQ norm of UQ is equal to 1. Okay? So this is equal to JQ of UQ, which is also equal to lambda Q. And of course, because this is bigger than 1, and the Yamabe invariant is the infimum of this function over here, this is bigger than the Yamabe invariant times this is bigger than the Yamabe invariant times the integral of UQ, the 2n n minus 2, the power n minus 2 over n. And remember that this limit here is bigger than 1. Then it implies that the lim inf of lambda Q, when Q goes to 2n over n minus 2, is bigger than the Yamabe invariant. So because of this and this, you have the equality here. Okay, so this will be useful when we will try to pass to the limit in this equation. So we know that this one will go to the Yamabe invariant. So remember that this is written here. So this is the end of the proof of this lemma. So GQ of UQ is equal to lambda Q. And this is equal to integral of gradient of UQ squared plus n minus 2 over 4 n minus 1 scalar curvature UQ squared. Lambda Q is a bounded family because of this. So it's easy to show because this basically looks like the H12 norm of UQ. So it's easy to deduce from this that the H12 norm of UQ is bounded. Okay? So now it's just a matter of function analysis. Once you know that this family UQ is bounded in H12, you can show that up to a subsequence, of course, you have the following. UQI goes to some function U weakly in H12. UQI goes to U, the same function, of course, strongly in L2. Because the embedding of H12 into L2 is compact. So you can, up to a subsequence, you can find a subsequence such that you have a strong limit in L2. Okay? You can also say that, remember that all the functions UQ are positive. So the family UQ goes to U almost everywhere, so U is non-negative. And this is also not very difficult. U is a solution of, where is the equation? I canceled it, I should rewrite it. It's a weak solution of the equation we are interested in, which is the Yamabe equation. So I use the fact, of course, that now I know that the limit of the UQ, of the lambda Q is the Yamabe invariant. Okay. So now okay, it's not finished. Don't be impatient. There is another long story behind after this. I should now we need to say some words. So how should I? Should just like for people in Formula One call it. When they stop to put some oil into the car and change the wheels and everything, they call it the pit stop. So there is what I will call the PD pit stop. Okay, not something very difficult, but okay. So we have a weak solution. U is in H12, of course. So we have a weak solution, non-negative, of this equation. So it's not very difficult now. It's very classical to show that U is smooth. No problem. And if you know that U is non-negative, it is a weak solution of this elliptic PDE. It is also easy to prove using the maximum principle for elliptic equation that you have two situations. The good one, U is positive everywhere. And if U is 0 somewhere, it has to be 0 everywhere. So we have almost finished. We have a smooth solution of this equation. And, okay, if we are in this situation, it's over. We have finished. The problem is solved. So we have to eliminate this possibility. And this is not very easy. So let me maybe a picture of what is going on. What could happen, basically? Of course, if the solution you get using this machinery here is this solution, you cannot say that you have solved the Yamabe equation, of course. This is not a good solution. It will not give you a conformal metric. So actually what can happen is the following. I will draw a picture here. So you have your manifold M, and you have your family of solution UQ for the subcritical equation. And it can happen that somewhere, so remember that the function UQ are all positive. So you have a solution, and it can happen that maybe at one point or several points, it's not important, but at least at one point, all the solution will concentrate. And will finally go to 0. And what you want to do is to prove that this cannot happen. The family UQ is not going to 0. You don't have, we call this a concentration phenomenon. Phenomenon, singular. The solutions UQ can concentrate at some point. And you want to prove that this does not happen. And this is what we are going to prove. Not in 5 minutes, but okay, anyway. So, there is a fundamental theorem which is due to Oba in 76. Of course, the fundamental theorem is related to the fundamental tool. So this theorem tells you that if the Yamabe invariant of your manifold is strictly less than this quantity here, this is the volume of the sphere to the 2 over n. What is this quantity? This quantity is exactly the Yamabe invariant for the standard sphere. The sphere with the round metric. If the Yamabe invariant is strictly less than the one of the standard sphere, then this cannot happen. You are in this situation. Let me finish with the proof of this fundamental theorem, and tomorrow I will show you how we can prove that we have this strict inequality, of course, unless if your manifold is a sphere. So the proof of this theorem, it's not very difficult. I follow my notes because I have only 3 minutes to do this. So we use the Sobolev inequality. For H12, of course, the set we are working on. It tells you that for all functions, I call it phi H12 of your manifold, the norm in 2n over n minus 2 of phi is smaller than the Yamabe invariant of the sphere, minus 1, times the gradient of phi square, plus some constant b positive, fixed, non-depending on phi, of course, phi square. This is the Sobolev inequality for H12 with the Yamabe invariant of the standard sphere here. This is the best inequality you can have. Okay, so we are going to use this Sobolev inequality. And this is the reason why this, the Yamabe invariant of the sphere comes into the game. It comes into the game because of this Sobolev inequality. You will see how right now. So we know that UQi QI to the 2QI is equal to 1, of course. So this is when I extract my subsequence here. So this is still Holder inequality. So this is smaller than this. So the power is this one. I put a 2 here. This volume of the manifold to the 2, 1 over Qi minus n minus 2 over n. Over 2n, sorry. Yes. So this is smaller than the volume to this power here. I don't write it. We don't care about it. So now I use the Sobolev inequality here. This. So this is smaller than Yamabe invariant of the sphere, of the standard sphere, minus 1 times. So I write it in the nice way, UQi. So I will have plus b UQi square. But here I add some extra term, which is not here, which is n minus 2 over 4n minus 1, integral of the scalar curvature, UQi square. Okay, so this is, okay, so you have, this is smaller than the volume to some power, always the same. The Yamabe invariant of the standard sphere, -1. And okay, so this is, so you have G of U QI plus some positive constant time UQI square. Okay? C is positive. So this is equal. Remember that the LQ norm of the family UQ is equal to 1. So this is equal to lambda QI. Okay? So now it's almost finished. Take the limit when I goes to plus infinity. And what you get is that 1 is smaller than, okay, the volume to this power, it goes to, the exponent goes to 0, this goes to 1, okay, disappears. Yamabe of the standard sphere. I know that this guy here goes to the Yamabe invariant of my manifold. Okay. I know that UQ goes to U strongly in L2. So this C times this, it is some constant, positive C prime, times the integral of U square. So now it's finished, because if sorry, there is a -1 here. If the Yamabe invariant of my manifold is strictly less than the one of the sphere, you will get, because of this inequality, that the integral of U square is strictly positive. So U cannot be 0. So I stop here. Tomorrow I will show you that actually when the manifold is not the sphere, this is always true. Okay, so thank you for your attention.